The morning sun had just climbed above the hills, casting a warm golden light over Ethan Cole's farm. Dew clung to the tall stalks of corn, and the soft hum of insects filled the air. Ethan walked slowly between the rows, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. His hands were rough from years of work, and his shirt was worn from countless seasons in the fields. He liked mornings like this, quiet, steady, predictable. For Ethan, life was simple. He woke with the sun, tended to the animals, watered the crops, and fixed whatever had broken overnight. There was a peace in this routine, a steady rhythm that never failed him. But on this morning, something was different. Somewhere beyond the eastern field, he thought he heard a faint, strange noise. It wasn't the sound of wind or the call of birds. It was more like a low hum mixed with a sharp crackle, as if the air itself was tearing. Ethan paused, adjusting his old cap to shade his eyes, and looked toward the sound. A faint shimmer hung in the distance, just above the corn. At first he thought it might be heat rising from the soil, but the air wasn't warm enough for that. The shimmer pulsed, then flickered like a broken light bulb. He frowned. Probably some kid's flying a drone again, he muttered to himself. But curiosity tugged at him. He set down his bucket and started walking toward the strange sight. As he got closer, the shimmer seemed to grow, taking on a faint metallic outline, something that looked like a shape trying to hide in plain sight. He blinked, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then, with a sharp crack, the shimmer burst apart, revealing a sleek silver shape that hovered just above the ground. It was about the size of his tractor, but with smooth, flowing curves and no wheels. Blue lights traced along its sides. Before Ethan could make sense of it, the craft wobbled in the air, let out a loud whine, and dropped heavily into the field, flattening several rows of corn. Ethan froze. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it wasn't anything made in the small farming town he called home. A panel on the side of the strange craft hissed and slid open, and from inside stepped a figure unlike any he had ever seen. The figure was tall, easily a head taller than him, with a lean, athletic build. She wore a dark, fitted suit, made of some material that seemed to shift colors slightly under the sun. A curved metal plate covered her chest and shoulders, and strange symbols glowed faintly along the edges. Her skin was smooth and faintly bronze, but her eyes glowed faintly gold, scanning the surroundings with sharp precision. She stepped onto the dirt with a confident stride, but then paused, as if surprised to see Ethan standing there. In her hand, she held something that looked like a weapon, long, slim, and humming softly. Ethan, though startled, felt his instinct to protect his land rise in him. He gripped the handle of the pitchfork he carried and took a small step forward. "This is private property," he said firmly, his voice steady even though his mind was spinning. "You're trespassing." The figure tilted her head, studying him like he was some curious animal. Then she spoke, her voice smooth but accented in a way Ethan couldn't place. "You are the human that owns this land?" Ethan hesitated. "Yeah. Name's Ethan Cole. And you are—" She didn't answer his question. Instead, she took another step toward him. "Your species, weaker than I expected," she said almost to herself. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Weaker, huh? Well, you're the one crashing into my cornfield." That made her stop for a moment. Her golden eyes flickered, and for the first time Ethan thought he saw a hint of irritation cross her face. "I am Zyra Vex of the Talkara warrior clans," she said. "I came to test the strength of this world. My craft was damaged, but it is only a delay." Ethan's mind tried to make sense of it all. An alien, a warrior, testing Earth? This sounded like something from one of those late-night TV shows he never watched. But here she was, standing in his field, looking as real as the dirt under his boots. "Look, Zyra," Ethan said slowly. I don't know what business you've got here, but you're on my farm and I'd appreciate it if you didn't go stepping around like you own the place. Zira's gaze sharpened. You would challenge me? A Talkara warrior? Ethan raised his pitchfork slightly, not in a threatening way, but to show he wasn't afraid. If you're looking for trouble, I've dealt with stubborn bulls and broken tractors. I can handle you too. Her expression changed, half amusement, half disbelief. She stepped forward again, and Ethan braced himself. But before she could say anything, there was a sudden hiss from her craft. A panel sparked and burst into a small flame. Zira turned quickly to look, and in that instant, Ethan saw his chance. Years of quick thinking on the farm had taught him to act without hesitation. He grabbed a nearby irrigation hose, turned the valve, and sent a powerful jet of water blasting toward the flames. But the spray also hit Zira full in the face, catching her off guard. She stumbled back, blinking rapidly as the water hit her eyes. Ethan moved fast. He swung the pitchfork low, catching the strange weapon from her hand and sending it tumbling into the dirt. Zira tried to regain her footing, but the wet ground and the force of the water made her slip. She landed hard on her back, the breath leaving her in a sharp gasp. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, Zira on the ground, surprised and clearly unprepared for such a simple tactic, and Ethan standing over her with the pitchfork, his chest rising and falling. I'm not looking for a fight, Ethan said finally. But if you're here to cause one, you'll find I'm not easy to push around. Zira's golden eyes narrowed, but there was something new in them now, something Ethan couldn't quite name. She didn't look humiliated exactly, but she did look intrigued. Slowly, she sat up, brushing dirt from her suit. You are unexpected, she said quietly, for a human farmer. Ethan stepped back, lowering his pitchfork but keeping it in hand. You haven't seen anything yet. The morning was no longer quiet or predictable, and Ethan knew, deep down, that whatever had just happened was only the beginning. The barn was quiet, except for the soft rustle of hay and the occasional creak of wooden beams in the summer breeze. Sunlight filtered through the small gaps in the walls, laying strips of gold across the floor. Zira Vex sat on a wooden crate, her tall frame slightly hunched so she would fit inside the human building. Her golden eyes moved constantly, scanning every tool, every rope, every strange piece of farming equipment around her. Ethan Cole stood a few feet away, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He had taken her weapon earlier and locked it in a storage cabinet. Zira had not asked for it back. She seemed more interested in observing him than in threatening him. You didn't answer my question earlier, Ethan said, breaking the silence. Why are you here? Zira tilted her head. Observation, evaluation. My people test the strength of new worlds to know if they are worth engaging with or conquering. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And how's that going for you so far? She gave a short, almost irritated breath through her nose. You are difficult to measure. Your body does not show the power I expect from a warrior. Yet you disarmed me with no advanced weapons. You used water and timing. Clever, but strange. Ethan gave a small shrug. Around here, you don't need to be the biggest or the strongest. You just need to be smart about how you use what you've got. Zira studied him in silence for a moment, her sharp gaze locking onto his face. Where I come from, strength is everything. It decides rank, respect, and survival. You speak of using what you have, but if what you have is not enough, you lose everything. Ethan picked up a small oil can from the workbench and began to oil the hinges of a rusty tool. And maybe that's why you lost to a farmer today. Her golden eyes flared slightly, but instead of anger, there was something else. Amusement, curiosity. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. You believe strength can be more than muscle and skill? I know it, Ethan replied. I've had seasons where the rain never came and the crops nearly died. I've had machines break in the middle of harvest. You don't survive that by just being strong. You survive by thinking, adapting, not giving up. Zira looked down at her gloved hands. For someone who spoke confidently about warriors and battles, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her expression. Adapting, she repeated quietly, as if tasting the word. The barn door creaked open, and a warm gust of wind carried in the smell of tilled earth. Ethan walked toward the open doorway, looking out over his fields. Zira followed, her steps silent, her gaze scanning the horizon. You live far from other humans, she noted. Closest neighbor is a few miles that way, Ethan said, pointing. I like it quiet. Where I come from, she said, quiet means danger is near. You stay alert. Ethan smiled faintly. Here, quiet means you can breathe. For a while, they stood in silence, watching the clouds drift lazily over the hills. Zira's eyes kept darting to the animals, chickens pecking. In the yard, a dog lying in the shade of a tree, the slow sway of the corn in the wind. To her, it was an alien world, one without the constant tension of her home. You called me weaker, Ethan said suddenly. Why? She did not look away from the fields. On my world, we train from childhood to fight, to endure pain, to push the body beyond limits. Your frame is not shaped by combat. Your hands are strong, but from work, not from battle. Ethan flexed his fingers slightly. Work can be a kind of battle, too. That made her glance at him. You speak like a leader, but you are only one man. Who do you command? Ethan chuckled softly. Just the land, the weather, and whatever breaks on the farm, and I don't command them, I work with them. Her brow furrowed slightly. Work with the land, the weather? They are not living soldiers. They're alive in their own way, Ethan said. If you fight them, you lose. If you understand them, you can make them work for you. Zira's golden eyes softened, just for a moment. Strange human, she murmured. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Ethan repaired a broken fence. Post! And Zira followed, asking endless questions about why he did each step the way he did. She examined his tractor, tapping the metal as if testing its durability. She picked up a hoe and tried using it, though she held it more like a weapon than a farming tool. Ethan had to show her the correct way, and she seemed mildly annoyed at not mastering it instantly. When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in deep orange, Ethan brought Zira a plate of simple food, bread, cheese, and a few fresh vegetables from his garden. She studied it as though unsure if it was safe, then took a careful bite. This is plain, she said after chewing. But it is real. Ethan smirked. Real's better than fancy most days. They ate in silence for a while. The sounds of crickets began to fill the air, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Zira's eyes moved toward the sound, her posture sharpening slightly. Relax, Ethan said. That's just nature talking. She gave him a sidelong glance. Your world has many voices. I am still learning which are safe. When the stars began to appear, Ethan looked up. You ever stop to just look? He asked. Zira followed, his gaze. Her homeworld's sky was rarely still, always filled with moving ships, drifting stations, and glowing battle satellites. The Earth's sky, however, was wide and clear, the stars shining like tiny fires in the darkness. She didn't answer. Right away. Finally, she said, On my world, we look at the sky to watch for enemies. Here, I feel like it watches me. Ethan leaned back against the barn wall. Maybe it's just saying hello. She turned to him, studying him for a long moment. You speak simply, but your words have weight. I wish to understand this strength you carry. Ethan met her gaze, and maybe I'll understand yours." Somewhere in that quiet moment, something shifted between them. Zira no longer looked at him as just a primitive human, and Ethan no longer saw her as just a dangerous intruder. There was still distance, still uncertainty, but also a thread of curiosity binding them together. The night deepened, and the cool air carried the smell of fresh earth. Zira stood at the edge of the barn, her eyes still scanning the land. Ethan turned down the lamp inside and leaned his pitchfork by the door. Neither of them knew it yet, but this unlikely curiosity was the first step toward a partnership neither of their worlds would have ever predicted. The next morning was fresh and cool, with a pale mist clinging low over the fields. Ethan was already outside, checking the fences and the irrigation pumps. He moved with the easy rhythm of someone who had done this work for years, his boots, leaving soft prints in the damp earth. From the barn doorway, Zira watched him closely. She had risen before sunrise, as was her habit back on her homeworld. Her body felt recovered from yesterday's mishap, and her pride, though dented, was still intact. She crossed her arms, golden eyes narrowed in thought. "You spoke of strength yesterday," she said at last, breaking the silence. Ethan didn't look up from tightening a bolt on the pump. "Yeah, I remember. You say it is not just muscle or speed," Zira continued. "I want to see what you mean." Ethan straightened and wiped his hands on his jeans. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" She stepped forward, her shadow long in the morning light. "Where I come from, we measure strength with trials. I challenge you." Ethan gave a small chuckle. "A challenge? Out here?" "Yes," she said firmly. 3 trials. If you win, I will admit your way of strength has value. If I win, you will admit my way is the only true strength." Ethan rubbed his chin, thinking. "All right. But we're doing it my way. No dangerous weapons, no hurting each other. Deal?" Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "Deal." The first trial. Lifting. They started in the equipment shed. Zira's first trial was simple. Lift the heaviest thing they could find and carry it to a marked point. Ethan pointed to a rusted engine block sitting in the corner. "That's about as heavy as it gets around here." Without hesitation, Zira stepped forward, gripped the engine with both hands and lifted. The metal groaned under its own weight, but she carried it across the shed floor with steady, deliberate steps, setting it down exactly on the marked spot. She looked back at him expectantly. "Your turn." Ethan walked up to the engine, squatted, low, and wrapped his arms around it. He could feel the strain immediately, but instead of lifting it in one motion like Zira had, he tipped it slightly and slid a length of thick rope under it. Then, using a pulley system attached to the shed ceiling, he slowly hauled the engine up, guiding it across with minimal effort before setting it down. Zira blinked, her expression unreadable. "You did not carry it." "No," Ethan said, "but the goal was to move it to the mark. I just did it without wearing myself out." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. The second trial. Endurance. The next trial took place in the fields. Zira chose a test of endurance, running from one end of the property to the other and back. They stood at the starting line, a dusty path running between 2 cornfields. Zira stretched like a trained athlete, her movements precise. Ethan just adjusted his hat and waited. When Zira gave the signal, they both took off. She moved like a hunting cat, fast, light on her feet, her breathing even. Ethan's pace was slower, his boots thudding steadily on the dirt path. By the halfway point, Zira was far ahead. She reached the end marker, turned, and began the run. Back, passing Ethan along the way with a confident glance. But as they neared the final stretch, Zira noticed something strange. Her legs were starting to feel heavy. The Earth's gravity, the unfamiliar terrain, and the thick morning air were taking their toll. Her breathing quickened. Ethan, meanwhile, kept the same steady pace. He wasn't fast, but he wasn't slowing down either. By the time Zira crossed the finish line, Ethan was only a few steps behind her, without a hint of exhaustion in his face. "You lost," she said, catching her breath. "Maybe in speed," Ethan replied, "but I could keep going for hours. Endurance isn't about who's ahead. It's about who can last when it really counts." Zira said nothing, but there was a flicker of respect in her gaze. The third trial, problem solving. For the final challenge, Ethan got to choose. He led Zira to the far pasture where a heavy wooden gate had broken and lay at an awkward angle. Beyond it, a group of goats waited impatiently to be let through. "Last trial," Ethan said. "Fix this gate so the animals can pass, but it has to stay strong enough to hold them back when it's closed." Zira stepped forward immediately. She grabbed the broken gate and tried to force it upright. The wood creaked under the strain. She pushed harder, using all her strength, until finally the hinge gave way with a sharp crack. The gate was standing. Again. But now it was unstable, leaning to one side. "It stands," she said, brushing her hands. "For now," Ethan said. "But watch." He opened the gate slightly, and one of the goats nudged against it. The whole thing wobbled dangerously. Zira frowned. Ethan picked up a few tools from his bag, found a sturdy branch, and cut it to size. Using nails, rope, and a wedge of stone, he reinforced the hinge and braced the side with the branch. When he was done, the gate swung smoothly, then locked firmly in place when closed. "Strength got it upright," Ethan said, "but it takes thinking to keep it there." A shift in the air. The 3 trials were over. Zira had shown raw power, speed, and determination. Ethan had shown patience, cleverness, and practical skill. Neither had completely defeated the other, but the lesson was clear. "You win by your own rules," Zira said slowly. "Not because you are stronger, but because you use more than strength." Ethan gave a small smile. "Guess that means I win your challenge." She stood silent for a long time, her eyes locked on him. Then finally she gave a single nod. "Perhaps your way has merit." As they walked back toward the barn, the morning mist began to lift, revealing a bright day ahead. Zira's posture was still proud, but her gaze held a new weight. She no longer looked at Ethan as just a farmer. She looked at him as someone who had passed a test she didn't know she was giving herself. For Ethan, the trials had been more than just games. They were a way to understand this strange warrior who had landed in his field, and though she might never admit it out loud, he suspected she felt the same. Somewhere in that shared respect, a fragile alliance had begun to form. The sun was high in the sky when Ethan was fixing a broken fence post near the edge of his field. The summer heat made the sweat drip down his forehead, but he paid no mind. His mind was busy thinking about the strange visitor in his barn. Zira Vex, the alien warrior who had challenged him and stayed on his land. From the sky, far above the clouds, a shadow moved quickly. It was a small ship, sleek and black, almost like a hawk hunting in the open sky. Inside, the ship's pilot stared at the screen before them with cold eyes. They had picked up the distress signal from Zira's damaged craft. The raiders were coming, and they were not here to make friends. Back on the farm, Ethan wiped his brow and heard a faint buzzing noise. He looked up and saw the small ship cutting through the sky, heading straight for the fields. His heart skipped a beat. Zira stepped out of the barn just then. She saw the ship, too. "They have come," she said quietly, her voice hardening. "They seek to capture me and take this world's resources." Ethan felt a sudden rush of protectiveness. "They're not getting past me," he said firmly. Zira nodded and looked around quickly. "We must prepare. This is not a battle you face alone." Ethan's eyes scanned the land. He saw tractors, irrigation pipes, farming tools, everything in his small world that could be turned into a defense. He grabbed his pitchfork and looked at Zira. Then let's get to work. Preparing for battle, Ethan moved quickly, gathering what he could. Old metal barrels, wooden planks, ropes, and hoses. He began setting traps along the field edges, digging shallow pits covered with thin layers of soil and straw. He tied ropes between trees to trip anyone running through. Zira studied his work, nodding in approval. Clever. Your world may not have the weapons of the Talkara, but your mind is a weapon itself. Ethan smiled. Thanks. I've learned a few things from years on this land. She then took out her own tools, small devices from her armor, and began setting sensors and alarms around the farm. They will not sneak in unnoticed. As the afternoon heat faded into evening, the sky began to darken with heavy clouds. A soft wind carried the smell of rain and the tension of coming conflict. Ethan and Zira stood together, watching the horizon. How many of them are coming? Ethan asked. Not many. A small strike team, Zira answered. But they are skilled and ruthless. We must be ready. Ethan tightened his grip on his pitchfork. I've fought stubborn bulls and storms. I'll fight them too. The raiders' arrival night fell quickly. The first stars blinked awake in the sky as the sound of engines grew louder. Ethan could see the raider ships descending behind the trees, black silhouettes against the moonlight. The raiders landed just beyond the field, stepping out in dark armor, their weapons glowing faintly. Their leader, a tall figure with a scarred face and cold eyes, stepped forward. Zira Vex, he sneered. Surrender or die. Zira stepped in front of Ethan, raising her hand. You will leave this world or face defeat. The raider laughed. We will take what we want, regardless of your threats. Ethan glanced at Zira and then at his traps. All right, let's see what you've got. Battle in the fields. The raiders charged across the field, but Ethan's traps were ready. One by one, the invaders fell into pits, tripped over ropes, or were slowed by mud and wet soil that Ethan had flooded using his irrigation system. Zira fought with swift, precise strikes, using her armor's strength and skill to take down raiders with ease. Her movements were sharp and powerful, her glowing eyes fierce in the moonlight. Ethan moved through the battle with surprising skill, using his pitchfork to trip and disarm enemies. He climbed onto a tractor and drove it slowly to block a group of raiders trying to flank them. The field became a chaotic battleground. The sound of metal clashing, shouted orders, and grunts of effort mixed with the rustling of corn stalks. At one point, a raider lunged at Ethan from behind. He barely had time to react, spinning and driving the pitchfork forward. The raider stumbled, caught off guard by the farmer's determination. Zira noticed and threw herself into the fight beside him. Together, they pushed the raiders back, moving as one. Victory and respect. After what felt like hours, the raiders began to retreat. Their numbers thinned and their spirits broken by the farm's defenses and the unexpected strength of the human and alien fighting side by side. Ethan and Zira watched as the last ship disappeared into the night sky. Breathing heavily, Zira looked at Ethan. You are stronger than I believed. Ethan smiled, wiping dirt from his face. It's not just me. It's this land, this home. I fight for it. Zira nodded slowly. A warrior's strength is not only in battle, but in what one protects. The farm was quiet again, bathed in soft moonlight. Ethan and Zira stood side by side, their partnership sealed by fire and struggle. The night air was cool and quiet, but a storm was coming, not from the sky, but from the darkness beyond the fields. Ethan stood near the edge of his farm, eyes sharp and hands steady on his pitchfork. Beside him, Zira adjusted her armor, her golden eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. The raiders were back, larger in number and more determined than before. They wanted to take Zira and the secrets of Earth's land for their own. But Ethan and Zira were ready. This was their home, and they would fight to protect it. Preparing. The battlefield, Ethan moved quickly, his years of farming experience turning into preparation for battle. He directed Zira to help him set up barriers made from old tractors, stacked hay bales, and wooden fences. Between the rows of corn, they dug trenches and set traps. Zyra used her alien technology to place sensors and alarms, watching over the fields like a guardian. She taught Ethan how to use some of her devices, turning his simple farm tools into powerful weapons. "The strength of the farm is not just in the soil," she said. "It is in the mind that guides it." Ethan smiled. "And the heart that refuses to give up." The raiders attack. Just as the last light faded from the horizon, the raiders arrived. Their ships descended dark shapes against the fading sky. Armed and ready, they marched toward the farm with confidence. But Ethan and Zira stood firm. As the raiders moved into the fields, traps sprung into action. Ropes tripped them, pits caught them, and irrigation sprinklers sprayed blinding water. Zira fought like a whirlwind, her strikes precise and powerful. She moved through the enemy ranks, protecting Ethan and using her strength to push the attackers back. Ethan was no longer just a farmer. He was a defender of his home. He swung his pitchfork, knocked weapons aside, and guided the traps with expert timing. His knowledge of the land gave him an advantage the raiders had not expected, turning the tide. The battle was fierce. Cornstalks were trampled, and the ground shook with the force of the fight. The raiders tried to regroup, but Ethan and Zira's teamwork was too strong. At one point, a group of raiders tried to flank them from the east. Ethan spotted them and shouted a warning. Zira quickly joined him, and together they blocked the attackers with a fallen tractor and a wall of hay bales. The raiders struggled to break through, but Ethan's traps held firm, and Zira's strength was unstoppable. One by one, the attackers fell or fled. Victory and respect. When the last raider ship lifted off into the night sky, Ethan and Zira stood together, breathing heavily but unbroken. Zira looked at Ethan with new respect. "You fought with more strength than I expected." Ethan nodded. "It's not just strength in battle. It's strength in protecting what you love." Zira smiled, a rare softness in her fierce eyes. "A warrior's greatest strength is in the cause they fight for." The farm was quiet once again. Under the stars, two warriors, one from Earth, one from the stars, stood united, ready for whatever the future might bring. "Would you like me to write part 6, the final chapter, where Zira makes her decision and the story reaches its heartfelt conclusion?" "You said part 6. 1000 words का लेखो और interesting होना चाहिए और third person style में लेखनी है और simple basic English का. Don't use any violated word. So please avoid any violated content." ChatGPT said, "Here is part 6, the final chapter, in simple, clear English, third person style, about 1000 words, keeping it engaging and clean." Part 6, A Warrior's Respect. The dawn light stretched slowly across Ethan's farm, painting the fields with soft gold and pink. The battle was over. The raiders had retreated, and for now the land was peaceful once more. Yet, in the quiet moments after the storm, something deeper stirred between Ethan and Zira. They stood side by side near the barn, watching the sunrise. Zira's armor was patched and worn, but her posture was proud and strong. Ethan, tired but steady, looked at her with a calm smile. "I must repair my ship soon," Zira said softly, breaking the silence. "The stars call me back." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I guess this isn't your home." "No," she said, "but it feels different here. Strange." Ethan glanced over the fields he had fought so hard to protect. "Sometimes a place grows on you. You don't realize it at first." Zira looked at him, her golden eyes thoughtful. "You have shown me strength in ways I never expected. Not just muscle or skill, but heart. That is rare among my people." Ethan shrugged. "I'm just a farmer, but I fight for what matters." For a long moment they stood quietly, the world around them waking with birdsong and gentle breezes. Then, Zyra reached into her armor and pulled out a small, shining object. "This is a token of respect," she said, holding it out to Ethan. It was a simple band of metal, etched with ancient symbols of the Talkara warrior clans. "In my world," she explained, "such a mark is given only to those who prove their strength and honor in battle." Ethan took the token carefully, feeling its weight in his hand. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Zyra replied. "It is a symbol of friendship." Ethan smiled, the warmth in his chest growing. "Then I accept it." Saying goodbye. The hours passed quickly. Zyra worked on her ship, her hands moving with skill and care. Ethan helped when he could, learning bits about the strange technology that seemed so advanced, yet fragile. As the ship's repairs neared completion, the moment to part came closer. Zyra stood at the edge of the farm, looking out over the fields. One last time. "I will return," she said quietly, "not as a warrior seeking conquest, but as a friend." Ethan nodded. "And I'll be here. The farm will still be standing." She smiled softly. "Strength is not always about battle," she said. "Sometimes it is about the bonds we build." With that, Zyra stepped into her ship. The doors closed with a quiet hiss, and the engines hummed to life. The ship lifted slowly, rising above. The farm, the rising sun casting a golden glow on its sleek surface. Ethan watched until the ship became a bright dot in the sky, then disappeared beyond the clouds. To beginnings. The farm was quiet once more, but Ethan felt a change inside himself. He looked around at his land, the soil, the crops, the open sky, and knew things would never be quite the same. He touched the token Zyra had given him, a reminder of the strength found not only in battle, but in respect, courage, and friendship. For the first time, Ethan felt ready for whatever challenges the future might hold. Earth was his home, but the stars were no longer just distant lights. They were a place of possibility. And somewhere out there, Zyra carried his strength with her, a symbol of a new kind of warrior's respect,